Because they came with more than one page. Okay, so when you go through the Bible and you're thinking, hey, I need to find a good example of a good father. A good father in the Bible. What have you got? Who's got an example of a good dad in the Bible? Moses, okay. Who else? Abraham. That's a half Sunday school answer there, you know. Wait, who? That's the half Sunday school answer. Where's the big Sunday school answer for the best father? Yeah, God, okay. That is a total Sunday school answer that's completely cheating, and none of us can live up to that standard. No, the funny thing is when you go through the Bible looking for good fathers, you can find bad fathers really, really, really fast. But there is a father you can find, he did pretty good. Joseph, you know Mary's husband? He was okay. I mean, his first son turned out okay, right? He did manage to make everybody mad at him to the point where they decided to kill him. And his younger brothers weren't so good. They turned out okay later. That may have something to do with the fact that, you know, the oldest boy rose from the dead. That helped them out a little bit. And but for old Joseph, he kind of disappears off the map before Jesus is 30, which means, quick calculation, he's about maybe 52. I'm running out of time. So I'm hoping to survive a bit longer than that one. But he did okay. I mean, he was identified as a righteous man. So good morning. Well, happy Father's Day. My name is Joshua Garvin. This is my wife, Rebecca. These are two of our children over here, Caspian and Reagan. My parents decided to come so that they can tell me the truth later. I did decide before coming that I would collect a couple of jokes that Jesus may have learned from Joseph, because it is Father's Day. A woman ran into a restaurant. Remember, these are good Jews. Keep this in mind. A woman ran into a restaurant in Israel. A group of young men were celebrating a bachelor's party. And she called out, "Is there a doctor here? Quick, quick!" Party stopped and everybody looks around. Man stands up and he says, "Yeah, I'm a doctor. Who needs my help?" "Oh, there's this poor lady here. Sir, please, come help." Doctor comes out, looks her over and says, "She looks completely healthy. What seems to be the problem?" "You're both single." Okay. After Shabbat, Mordecai took Rabbi Yachav's hand and said, "Rabbi, you give a very good sermon today. You should have it published." "Thank you," said the rabbi. "Just between you and me, I am planning to have all of my sermons published, posthumously." "That's great news," said Mordecai, "but the sooner the better." Okay. So yes, this is Father's Day, which we notate on the church calendar. Tell fathers where they have failed day. That's as opposed to the other day which you know about, which is give every mother a rose, tell her how wonderful she is, and then measure her up against the queen who has a whole host of servants at her disposal. Thank you, Proverbs 31. But on Father's Day, we do like to cite certain passages. For example, Ephesians 5:25. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. And we skip to verse 28 and say, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies, and he who loves his wife loves himself. We then very carefully avoid discussing the surrounding context about submission and headship to avoid offending some of the vocal wives, or worse, to embolden certain husbands to use these passages as a license for very bad behavior. And I'm going to assume that you have heard all of these sermons plenty of times. Instead, I'd like to talk to you about a very famous father. Sorry, it's not Abraham, Moses, or any of those. You know him by name, and then we're going to discuss the father's purpose in his children's lives. And after that, an example of 4 truly stellar fathers. The first is David, the most famous king of Israel and the author of about half of the Psalms. He's known as a man after God's own heart. He was raised as youngest son of Jesse, and he had the great misfortune of being the afterthought of the family, being left out with the sheep when Samuel came to Jesse's house to offer sacrifices and to secretly anoint the new king. And as you know, I mean, he wasn't there. He's like, do you have anybody else? No? Okay. So this is poor David. But out there, he learned how to sing, how to play the harp, how to use a sling, how to be quick with a sword. He was a master poet. He was a prophet. He was a shrewd leader. And his one focus was always on pleasing God. But David was a terrible husband, sporting 8 wives and at least 10 concubines, and he was an even worse father, with an unknown number of children. Of his first 4 sons, one tried to kill him, one dropped off the map, one raped his sister, and the 4th was executed after twice trying to steal the throne from Solomon. Regarding his son Adonijah, 1 Kings 1:6 says, David, his father, had never rebuked him by asking, why do you behave as you do? I've said much worse to my children. David was in every way absent, either too busy at war, enforcing the law, judging cases, collecting new women. His children ran free with their wealth and their power, costing over 20,000 men their lives pointlessly in one battle alone. David is in many ways like many men today. They work very hard. They provide for their family quite gloriously. And then they leave all the parenting to their wives or their girlfriends or their baby mamas or whoever they may be, just essentially abandoning them. And this, of course, is a recipe for disaster. According to the National Center for Fathering, citing the Census Bureau, 33% of children in America now live without their biological father. 20% of children, over 20% of children live with only a mother. And this is only increasing. Absent fathering is associated with sharp increases in drug and alcohol use, suicide, sexual promiscuity, educational failure, aggressive behavior, and criminal activity. David may have loved God, but he did no favors for his family. The consequences of his disastrous non-fathering came back on him, on his wives, his poor concubines, his children, and upon his entire nation. They all were able to suffer the penalty of his abandonment. A father can only be home when he's home. But if he is home and he's still absent while home, he's essentially useless to his wife and his children. Or even just becomes a burden to his wife. This one type of father is often called the Peter Pan. Get that from the psychologists, I guess. I've heard various women comment on their husbands being another child in the family. Unfortunately, growing up has become increasingly optional. There are so many ways to avoid responsibility. And a 40-year-old boy cannot possibly discipline his 16-year-old son. He hasn't the wisdom to do it. He hasn't the wherewithal to do it. He just doesn't know what he's doing. He never bothered to learn. And this 16-year-old boy living with his 40-year-old boy has absolutely no reason in the world why he should listen to his mother, who's screaming and crying and losing her mind trying to get this barbarian into place. Another type of disaster comes from the opposite direction. The man who can't be bothered with things like babies and little children. They get in his way. His true love is the television, or his car, or his sports, or his video games, or his beer. He's selfish with his time and his energy. And while he may be physically present and capable of bringing his authority and his masculine figure to bear, he refuses to do so in any meaningful way. And then when he does, he's only just trying to keep his wife and his children out of his way. Similarly, there's the ever angry father. His presence becomes an actual detriment to the family as a whole, and he's the worst of all masculine worlds. Domineering, abusive, and violent, taking himself down to the lowest point of what masculinity can become. He actively teaches his sons to be evil. He drives his daughters into the arms of other abusive men. And he thinks he's a man's man. But he's utterly unworthy of respect, and he's a fool. Being a good father, it's not particularly complicated. Ask me how I know. I have 7 children. But it does require getting a grip on your own life and subjecting yourself to just a little bit of self-discipline. It means making fatherhood your priority. Not in competition with work, but more important than work. It's not a sideshow for the evening. Not an obnoxious irritant that you have to deal with in order to sleep in your own home. Instead, it's the primary purpose for coming home. You work to make money and to raise your children well and to care for your wife. That is the end of your purpose for working. If you're trying to get ahead, as I spent 2 decades attempting to do, then I have to ask you, ahead of what? We as men are driven by competition. We really just want to advance. I mean, there's this giant, glorious thing we're trying to get to when we're at work. It's not a good prize. We need to check what we're trying to race to win. Like Paul says in 1 Corinthians 9:25, everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last. But we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Paul was not talking about his employer, his job. He was talking about his service to Jesus Christ. Now, at this point, I know I'm supposed to, soften the remark for fathers. I suppose probably a few of you, and I'm among you, who are or were in the armed services or other fields of employment who have no option but to be away from your children for protracted periods of time, months, even years. But the softening remark is not warranted here. Because the truth is that if you're away from your family for long periods of time, you are in fact damaging them. I've known too many military families, both from friends and family myself, growing up in a military family. Thank you, by the way. To pretend that servicemen are exempt from this, or that firefighters out dealing with the blazes every summer are exempt from this, or that anybody else who's going out and doing service are actually exempt. This service is needed, it's necessary, but it doesn't actually do good for our kids. And this is what David runs into. He spent a lot of time at war. Being such an absent father, it's somewhat ironic that David's own son Solomon wrote the following in Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way they should go, and even when he is old, he will not depart from it. And of course, we've all heard this numerous times, and there's nothing about this proverb that's not true today. It is not an instruction to raise your children in the way that you really wish that you had gone when you were young. It means to raise your child to become what the child should become. Should your son really become an attorney or a doctor just because you wanted to be? Or is that just your dream? And in fact, when your child should become something actually much greater than either one of these. Your views of what your child should be are quite possibly much lower than what your child should be. As a father, it's your job to ensure that you guide your son or daughter down the right road. Why you? Your wife, if you haven't noticed, is typically a rather pragmatic person. She's focused upon very important and very present matters, such as, for example, preventing your 8-year-old son from flinging himself off the roof into a pile of lumber, just to see what would happen. She is also attempting to teach your 4-year-old daughter that the skirts must be worn down and not over the head, while simultaneously trying to calm down your eye-rolling teenager because someone said something to someone about something at some time in the past, and it probably wasn't true anyway. Your wife is focused on doctors, focused on teachers, focused on dishes, focused on meal planning, focused on her head exploding because of all the things that are happening right now. And the more children you have, the merrier. Right, Mom? Yes. While your wife is striving in futility to tame all the barbarians, it's certainly your role to occasionally grab a fleeing child and throw them back into the ring, or to ensure the terror of healthy discipline. But it is also your job as a father to pierce through the darkness of the coming days and to guide your children into the future and not keep your eyes here in the present. As the great and ever-quotable Jedi Master Yoda said, difficult to see. Always in motion the future is. But look in the future you must, lest you allow your children to drift around aimlessly. Yoda may not be able to see into the future, but as a father, you can. You can see the potential paths of each one of your children individually. And then you can guide them down those right paths and help to steer them from the ones that are horrid. First, you have to guide with your vision. The vision that you set will drive everything about your life. And it'll inspire absolutely everyone around you. It'll inspire your wife, your children, your coworkers, your friends, even your dog, either to follow you or to avoid you. I've worked in several different corporations, and they always like to put this vision statement up on the wall. But the vision written in the boardroom by all the higher-ups, it almost never matches the actual vision of the company. So here are a few. Microsoft's vision is to help people and businesses throughout the world realize their full potential. And let's be honest, this isn't Microsoft's vision. Microsoft's real vision, as we all know, is to remind their customers every few years that they can force absolutely everybody to overhaul everything about how they use their computers for no reason whatsoever. AT&T. We aspire to be the most admired and valuable company in the world. Now, I believe the second half of that. They do want to take over the world. But admired? AT&T? Anybody? Apple's vision statement is to make the best products on earth and leave the world a better place than we found it. I do think they believe this. But apparently, the slaves in China and the mining for lithium in Africa are not important parts about the betterment of the world. Google's vision is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And this is true in so much as you agree with their worldview. And if you don't agree with their worldview, be prepared to be silenced. Amazon? To be Earth's most customer-centric company where customers can find and discover anything they might want to buy online and endeavor to offer its customers the lowest possible price. And I think we can all agree that there's a company who actually matches their vision. You see, it's one thing to articulate a vision. It's a completely different thing to go after it. A father's real vision is like a company vision. It's his real, actual focus. He can say, our family is going to follow first and foremost after Jesus Christ. But if he spends his weekends and his evenings watching football, arguing with his wife about the finances, debating with his neighbor about the intricate details of yet another Trump indictment, and spending his money on alcohol, toys, concert or sporting tickets, computers, cars, and the new Ego Power Plus Select Cut lawnmower, I checked, it's the best on the market right now, then he's demonstrating by his deeds and his spending that his words are a lie. And his wife and his children, not being stupid people, will know it. Look at what James, the brother of Jesus, had to say. James 2:18. This is where he split the church. Someone will say, you have faith, I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I'll show you my faith by what I do. If your direction in life really is to follow after Christ, your children will catch on to that fact. They will see you reading and studying the Bible, praying about everything, and discussing matters of the faith with their mother. They will see your inspiring faith in response to the tragedies of life. They will see your resolve. They will see your courage. They will see your strength, your patience, and your compassion. And whether they receive Christ for themselves or not, God forbid, they will be inspired by it. And you will then have the credibility and the earned respect to present Jesus Christ to them. But if your direction in life is to really just to do things that please yourself, and Christ is just a facet of an otherwise complicated and busy life, or if you just wear him like a t-shirt over your sin-riddled life, then your children will see that the term King of Kings and Lord of Lords is meaningless. They will see your idols, your self-gratification, possessions, food, women, back to David, and the masters, and as the masters that have overcome your weak God. They will see that serving Jesus Christ is at best non-essential. And would it be any wonder that they turn away from him? Having a singular vision means sacrificing things that you otherwise would be able to have. Jesus said this in John 12:25. Whoever loves his life loses it, and whoever hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Being a Christian means that there are things that you must give up for the sake of Jesus Christ and for the health of your own soul and for the health of the souls of your children. Listen to the way that the author of Hebrews expresses vision. Hebrews 12:1 and 2. Since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith. With your eyes firmly fixed on Jesus Christ, throw off everything from your life that gets in the way. Everything between you and Jesus Christ is sin. No, this does not mean getting rid of your mother-in-law. If anything prevents you from focusing on God in every area of your life, then it is an obstacle that must be removed. Teach your children the importance of God in your life by making God important in your life. Read the Bible regularly. Pray earnestly. Forgive and apologize even to your own children. Love your wife and treat women with utmost care. And trust God in every circumstance, no matter how terrible it is. And the more terrible it is, trust Him all the more. I remember my eldest brother, had told me one time, he had asked me, I was having a particularly rough time. And he said, is there any way through it? And I said, there's no way through this. He said, what you're saying is it's impossible. I said, it's absolutely impossible. And he said, good. Now it's God's territory. And you will absolutely succeed. Not in what I wanted to do. That wasn't part of the equation. Don't make your kids have to figure out whether you value God or your bank account or the television or your phone more. Second, solidify your vision with a good education. Now, as Americans, when we hear the term good education, we know exactly what we're talking about. It means good grades in school, attending a prestigious university. I mean, essentially something the opposite. Living out a godly example is critical. Without this foundation, no child is going to believe you. And even the most elegant words of wisdom will be lost on deaf ears. But actions without words are easily misunderstood. You must also talk to them and explain to them the deep things of God. This means theology. It means doctrine. It means history. It means annoying conversations where your children ask questions that you just don't have answers to, like, when we get to heaven, will we still be boys and girls? And why did Adam and Eve care about God seeing them naked? Didn't they know that God could see them in the bath? In Deuteronomy, God mentions educating your children several different times. Deuteronomy 4:9. Make the things that your eyes have seen known to your children and your children's children. And Deuteronomy 6 and 7. These words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit at home, when you walk by the way, when you rise up, when you lie down. In Deuteronomy 6:20, God gives a specific example. If your son asks you this, then give him this very, very specific explanation. It's a long verse. I'm not going through it. So, when your kids ask you why you do all this religious stuff, you should give a full and complete answer. And next year, when they ask you again, you do it again. What God did not tell fathers to do is to pass the buck on to the rabbi, on to the wife, to be ignorant of God's promises, or to say, we just do it. Instead, God told you to tell them, son, God kept his promise to do this and to do that. Watched it happen. We know that he will keep his promise to take care of us in the future. God did these things. Well, how do you know Jesus rose from the dead? I have answers for that. We can kind of prove it. Imagine sitting with your children in the evening around a blank television, reading through the Gospels, explaining to them the significance of parables. For some of you, this will immediately sound like a fairy tale, and you really wish it could be part of your life. For some of you, this sounds like a nightmare. But there's good news for the first of you. This image can certainly be yours if you value it enough. For the second, bad news, this image must be yours if you value the souls of your children. Consider again King David, who had such great faith. Yet he did not intentionally and purposefully pass it along to his own children. Yeah, I know what some of you are thinking is, I have a very busy schedule. My children have a very busy schedule. I have 7 children. I even have a grandbaby. Sometimes it's been easy. Sometimes it's been really hard. And it has always taken effort and prioritization. My oldest son was in orchestra, quite good at it. But he was not in sports, he was not in karate, he was not in environmentalist club, he was not in theater. If your children's schedules are jammed with extracurricular activities, print out this passage and nail it to your door. Mark 8:36 and 37. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and to forfeit his soul? What can a man give in exchange for his soul? The extracurriculars are not that important. I know that we've been told year after year how desperately important it is to keep your children so busy that they don't have time to do anything else. But that's the point, isn't it? They don't have time to do anything else. Please trust me. Your daughter is going to fare far better in this life by absorbing Esther than by learning how to recycle. Your son will make a better man if he studies the life of Abraham than if he can shoot a free throw. And as God is creator, learning the Gospels and doctrine will fare all of your children far better than learning about the sexual opportunities that they could have sliding up and down the gender spectrum. I'm not saying that extracurriculars have no value. I am saying that you need to keep them in perspective. It is true that karate can help teach your son self-discipline. So can studying James, and for far cheaper. And while I can think of a million situations where memorizing James can help your future life, I've never met a man who actually needed karate in a pinch. Maybe you're the guy. But I have watched many men fail where James pounding on their skull may well have helped. Rather than watching trash modern movies, sit around a Mike Winger Q&A and discuss the merits of what the Scripture has to say and how to read the Bible carefully. Rather than sitting around the coffee table on your phones and your laptops, try pulling out your Bibles for an hour and reading Galatians. Rather than panicking about your finances and arguing pointlessly with your wife, sit down with her in the living room with the children watching and pray together for the strength and the faith to get through the tough times that are today and ahead. And God knows there's no shortage of tough times. Now, for those dads in the Bible that I promised at the beginning, these are the men you don't know anything about. They are the fathers of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whose names you do not know. We know nothing about them except this: they raised their sons well. To have a deep and abiding trust in the living God. Because of this, despite their education in Babylon's finest indoctrinational schools, these men stood alone against the national religions of Babylon and Persia. Alone. They alone faced down the wrath of kings and persecutors. Daniel faced execution by lions, and the 3 others execution by burning. But God was pleased with them all, and he spared all of them, Because of the faith given to them by their fathers, they have been heroes of history for the last 2,500 years. And as a father, I can say that nothing pleases me more than when my children stand in faith. No education, no income, no well-situated marriage, no accolade, no award in this world will ever replace that. If you want your children to have faith in God, show them, teach them, walk the road with them, guide them. Do not dump the job on the church. Do not dump it on your wife. Be the man that God made you to be. Pick up the standard of Jesus Christ and carry it ahead of your family, and they will be able to follow after you. Is it easy? No. That wouldn't be any fun anyway. All the best things are hard. Do it anyway. Children can be wonderful imitators. Give them something to imitate. I ran out of pages.